Greetings. Thank you so much for asking me to join you at your conference on business, commerce, and information technology. I wish I could be there with you. I was in India a year ago, and hopefully in the future we will be able to continue this conversation in person. Let me tell you about my time in India a year ago. I received a Fulbright Nehru Fellowship. The university, the Central University of Punjab, invited me to come and help them launch a master's in peace and conflict resolution. And why I'm telling you this is because it was the Department of Economics who invited me. And I think that helps explain why I have been invited to help you launch this important gathering today. I am a professor of negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building. But I'm going to be telling you a little bit about my background and past. And I grew up in a techie family, so I feel right at home speaking to you. I don't know if you realize the role that information technology has played in the field of negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building. If you had been born and raised in the United States or another Western country, you would definitely know that game theorists have been using information technology and doing computer simulated research for many years, attempting to determine optimal decision-making and decision-making at a higher moral level, higher moral ground. It's beautiful in intent, but it has been challenging in practice because, as we all know, I'm assuming every one of you enjoys math the way that I have enjoyed math in my life. Math is a model of reality, of the complexities of life. It can never be equated with life itself. Unlike human beings, we are attempting to create our best models of human behavior and human living, but given these are models, they often fall short. The good news, though, for my field at least, is that information technology and this computer simulated research has been able to identify some of the optimal forms of negotiation. And I'd like to introduce my talk today by giving you a taste. I don't know if you've ever heard of generous tit for tat or forgiveness math, but what games theorists found, it's very Gandhi-like actually. I hope you all revere and respect Gandhi like I do. I've been to India enough to know that not everyone does, but I'm going to assume some of my audience today does. And what they discovered was very much what Gandhi would have promoted. Generous tit for tat recommends that if your negotiation opponent does something nasty, does something against you, and maybe you can share this with your politicians in India as they attempt to negotiate with Pakistan and China. But what they found to be optimal is taking the higher moral ground, extending what we often call an olive branch, a reconciliatory gesture, an opportunity for your enemy to move to higher moral ground with you, and attempt in negotiation lingo to negotiate a win-win that will lift everyone higher. Now, obviously, in the real world, this is not that easy to do. First of all, you must pick people, and I will talk about my own political leadership in the United States, who may not even have the intelligence to recognize a golden opportunity when it is extended to them. You may extend an olive branch over and over, and they will bite off the branch. They will break the branch. They simply don't recognize that the opportunity you are offering is one that will benefit them as well as yourself and build a strong, interdependent future. Well, that's a quick introduction to my field, my discipline. Those of you actively involved in business and commerce know that negotiation is at its heart. So you can imagine the negotiations I have done over a lifetime. I will be telling you about my background in a minute. And you can also imagine how I've been consulting with business and commerce in my lifetime. Now, information technology is a little bit different. It has emerged in dramatic force in my adulthood, but when I first started my career, it was just starting. I think computers and information technology were born about the same time I was. So it was just starting to get started back then. For those of you who might not be understanding what I'm saying about negotiation, let me talk about negotiation in simple terms, and you will automatically see the parallels with business and commerce. Negotiation in its simplest terms is identifying a human need, and if that is a large group, a large collective, that human need becomes a market, and determining how to best, most effectively meet that need. And the process of negotiating, meeting human need, if it is done effectively and evaluated to become even more effective, will build relationships that last and sustain themselves. Again, the heart of business and commerce. Without human need and the intent to meet that need with a product or service, and then to build a lasting, satisfactory relationship, we would not have business and commerce. We would not have democracy. We would not have much of what is needed in the world today. And so you can see how negotiation, business, and commerce parallel. Now, I promised to tell you a little bit about myself. I excelled in math and science, particularly physics, as a young girl, not surprisingly because I was born into a techie family. My father was born and my uncles were born at a time where information technology did not exist. So they became engineers in other disciplines. And then I have an uncle who went on to work and do finance for the U.S. State Department and work with Aid for International Development. So he helped launch the career that I'm living. But by the time we were born, my father's children, information technology, computer engineering, software engineering, those were very promising career paths. And no surprise that several of us would excel at math and science. My father helped me with math every day. I'm hoping that I'm talking to several women at the moment as well as men. And if any of you have questions or would like to have a conversation with me, please reach out virtually. You're welcome to email me and send me your interests and needs, and we can start to have some conversation. I was actually one of the top girls in my class, and so the Society of Women Engineers encouraged me to consider becoming an engineer myself. Now, my brother is a manager of information technology, and my sister works for one of the largest virtual marketing research firms in the world, and I have another brother who's a computer engineer who created the SoundHack software. He's very much a part of the electronic music industry. And then a brother-in-law in Ireland who teaches computer engineering there. Again, when I was being encouraged to be an engineer, we were not yet utilizing information technology. So that was not a path that was offered to me. But I'll tell you, when I was encouraged, and that includes scholarship, financial support, my response was no thank you. And I want to tell you why, because I think all of you, particularly in India, our world's largest multicultural democracy, with very ugly, scary nationalism happening, just like it's happening in the US, just like it's happening in Brazil. Not what you want to see in the best of democracy, but given that that's happening, I feel compelled to speak out. I said no to engineering for two reasons. One was it was a male-dominated industry and profession, and I still have no interest in limiting myself to a male-dominated profession and industry. In fact, thank God, I have a more democratic partnership with my husband. I do not believe in male domination. I do not believe in patriarchy. I do not believe in power over people, authority over. You will hear that I also was born into a multicultural, multilingual family with relatively recent immigration to the United States. I grew up hearing both Norwegian and German. And my German-speaking grandfather fought in World War II against Hitler and Nazi Germany. My family, if you know any Norwegians, you will know they stand for democracy. It's a very important value. In fact, the extreme difference between the wealthy and the poor that you see in both the United States, India, and Brazil, Norwegians find shameful in a way, deeply disappointing and disturbing. They believe more in a society of true equality where everyone shares the wealth and everyone's needs are met. And I'm enough of their child and grandchild that I very much believe that as well. And of course, it's essential for peace building in the world. I could not be teaching negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building if I was promoting a system dominated by one power, let's say China, authoritarian rule. I simply couldn't do it. No one, the world would not be with me. It's very rare that people are comfortable with that approach. So anyways, I said no to engineering, and then I went and explored my options. And please bear with me. You will understand why I'm telling you all of this as I continue, because information technology is playing such a role with my field, but also business and commerce. And before I go on with my own career path, let me respond to the conference themes and sub-themes that were sent to me. I found them very intriguing, and once again, it would have been fun to join you and hear some of your presentations, some of your interests, especially with this pandemic. Wow, we are seeing everything change dramatically with this pandemic and the global consciousness that this is likely to be part of our lifetimes, reoccurring pandemics. And one of the sub-themes talked about the end of globalization, or perhaps the retreat from globalization. And I feel compelled to share that I have a very different perspective being in the United States. I'm talking to you from California right now, actually Los Angeles County, which is the worst infected part of the world at the moment. Our immigrant community, very vulnerable. The mayor of my city, his mother just passed from the coronavirus. And we are doing everything virtually. Everything. It's no surprise I'm coming to you virtually today. All of our connections with each other, medicine, doctor-patient communication. I have been teaching virtually now for almost 20 years. I have taught and traveled to date. My students and colleagues represent over 80 different countries. And so I understand the power and the need for the virtual platforms and information technology. But many of the world has not appreciated its value until now. And I'll tell you from the United States perspective, Government has used as much of their resources as they can, particularly our schools, to ensure that the low-income communities and their children also have access to information technology, that our elderly, that are vulnerable have access, that as many people as possible have access. So from my perspective, we have accelerated globalization because, as you know, information technology has connected all of us. It is being used in many ways that we've never envisioned because of the creativity, the innovation, the adaptability of all those within the information technology world. Now, IT, from my perspective, with my family, is driving business and commerce. So I hope you don't mind if I talk a bit more about information technology than other aspects of business and commerce. But so you're free to write me with questions you might have, and we can talk about a wide array of interests because I teach ethics, and I simply don't have the time today to explore all the different ethical issues with information technology, patents. Your colleague who invited me to speak to you today is introducing me to cyberbullying and how it is actually more of a problem in India than it is in the United States. And you know, all of these different ethical issues, homeland security, I would love to have more time to address some of them. I won't be able to. But you hear me when I'm saying we're actually more connected. And I think we've only just begun to experience globalization. Now, I'm well aware there's a Chinese-led contingent now breaking away from the Western information technology. So we're not going to see globalization the way it was pre-pandemic. But if from an information technology perspective, we are certainly going to see rich continuing globalization and more young people seeing themselves as global citizens. Now, historically, many came to the United States in order to create a better life for their family, for themselves, for their community, for their country. That was my grandmother's generation, my grandfather's generation. At the moment, that is not happening the way that it did in the past. People are coming here and their opportunities are less than they experienced in their own country, unless they're a doctor from India, a nurse from India, but otherwise, a computer engineer from India, but otherwise many people are disappointed. Instead, what I am seeing is that students of the world are staying at home. They're staying with their families, but they are embracing information technology, software engineering, all the different, possibilities, homeland security, even forensics, information technology. They're embracing these career paths as the path to create a better future for themselves, their families, their communities, and their nations. And these career paths don't require the immigration that was required in the past. They are globalized, and so it's very interesting what's emerging. Now, my own career path, I eventually decided on law. I very much wanted to be part of trying to solve the worst problems we see in the world. I grew up with Norwegians who love nature, so I'm very much an environmentalist who studied environmental law. I love that India protects its trees. That would be a whole nother conversation. Law in this country, if you don't know, is more like medicine in India. It is a very competitive, rigorous, professional, years of preparation. and very competitive, so that many people who aspire to practice aren't able to. But I was able to, and I worked as a litigator, as a trial attorney, an advocate, a negotiator with an international commercial law firm, an Ivy League law firm, and was able to advise all kinds of business and commerce, manufacturing. I did securities work, some bankruptcy. So the whole range. I'm not going to focus on that today, but I want you to know that is part of why I'm speaking to you today. I eventually left that practice and started my own negotiation conflict resolution firm. So I started my own business. And I want to talk about entrepreneurship and the need for starting and growing successful new businesses as I talk to you today, because it's very much a part of business and commerce today. Our young people need to be encouraged to start businesses, to grow their ideas, to find markets, to meet market needs. And it's not easy to do, to grow your own successful business. In the United States, it normally takes a lot of business coaching from seasoned business people and a solid 10 years to grow clientele. Now, I don't know, none of my family started their own business in information technology, but I imagine if someone were to have started a consulting firm, it would be a similar experience. Why I'm mentioning my own practice to you is, for the first time in my life, I had the opportunity to closely work with software engineers, scientists, computer engineers, managers of information technology, whole range of technical folk, and also middle managers. And I'm going to be talking to you specifically about middle managers that I worked with who would come to the United States from Japan, from the leading Japanese businesses, the most successful. If I named them, you would recognize all of their names. And they would come to the University of Denver, where I began my teaching career, and immerse themselves in American culture and practice their English. You know, Japan's not like India or Norway or any of the other countries that raise their children to be bilingual and multilingual. Japanese are more hindered in that normally they're not fluent in English, not even fluent enough to have preliminary conversations. So they would come here and they would study for several weeks, and we would introduce them to business, commerce, of interest to them. I was in Colorado at the time, throughout Colorado. And first of all, I want to ask if any of you are familiar with the U.S. Constitution. I wouldn't imagine you would be. And since you haven't studied it in law school like I did, I don't think you're going to be aware of what I'm about to say, but it will help you understand my own life experience. Because of how the U.S. Created itself, and I have worked with many indigenous tribal people as well, and very close friends who are indigenous. I'm well aware of the history. But people coming here to build better lives. When the U.S. Constitution was created, commerce was its most important clause, not human rights, not equal protection under the law, not voting rights, and none of it that you would imagine. All freedom of speech, you know, you see all of this conflict that we have that involves constitutional rights. Commerce was number one. Probably why my current president assumes that he knows better than everyone how to run the country, because he sees himself as a commerce guy. From our perspective, one who's gone bankrupt many times, but still he sees himself as aligned with American values. Well, so anyways, I was working with middle managers studying business and commerce in the United States as well as American culture, and had the opportunity to introduce them to Hewlett-Packard engineers. Now, generally at this point, these were white American male. And I imagine while India has a huge market, I mean, all of you could spend the rest of your life focusing on meeting the market needs of India. But I do imagine some of you will have international opportunities or international interests. And especially on a virtual platform, and I want to give you my experience with the worst of what can happen with traditional white American male engineers. Sad but true, and you heard I grew up with people who I love dearly who fit this mold, but it's part of the reason I did not enter engineering. What I found is that I'll talk about one in particular who was being introduced to Japanese middle managers. He simply did not have the capacity, the tolerance to understand that we all grew up in different ways, that we come from different cultures. And with my life experience, I'll say every one of our cultures has strengths and every one of our cultures has weaknesses. And if we have an open mind and an ability to learn about those who are different than us, we can go very far in this world. But if we're uncomfortable with any difference at all, and this man, I'll give you a very specific example. He wanted things done very quickly. He would have had an easier time, from my experience, knowing and working with Indian people, much easier time with the communication, with the back and forth discussion. But if you have worked with Japanese, traditional Japanese at all, you will know they work as a collective within their companies. It's very much top down. There is a recognized authority, and all of the junior employees need to follow suit, fit in, and so they need long periods of time to quietly, privately consult with each other and reflect on what they're learning, what they're hearing before they respond. So it's a very different way of proceeding than most American businessmen are used to. And this engineer could not handle any of it. He could not understand why these Japanese men, they were all men, were not acting the way he was accustomed to men acting, despite my attempts to translate, interpret, and help him. I also had this experience when the U.S. Department of the Interior asked me to help them with conflict resolution within the U.S. Department of the Interior. Now, I'm sure India has its equivalent with its beautiful national parks and all. This isn't our Environmental Protection Agency, which is more legal. This is our managerial agency that oversees all our national parks, all our public lands, our hydro dam projects, Army Corps of Engineering, all of that. So it's an agency, a government agency that is full of information technology, engineer scientists of all kinds. And I'll share my experience trying to help. Now, when I do conflict resolution within business, commerce, and information technology, let me give you a picture of the possibilities. Now, I'm no longer an arbitrator, but if for those of you who have been involved with or studied international business, you will be aware that contracts are made that include the way that conflicts will be resolved if conflicts arise, so that companies can avoid getting embroiled in all the complexities, delay of our national court systems. So companies will negotiate with each other and create a contract, an agreement in which they agree to arbitrate any disputes they have over rule of law, whatever the issue is. And I have served as one of those arbitrators. That arbitration panel is selected by the business people that are involved in whatever the dispute is, whatever the business relationship is. And we act like judges. It's quasi-legal in that we are considering the law in our decision-making, but we are generally industry experts, so we're different than judges. We have expertise in business, commerce, and information technology. I had expertise in securities, so I was doing securities arbitration. That is one possibility when I offer my services to business, commerce, and information technology. The other and the more popular one that I still do now is mediation, which Gandhi introduced to the world. Gandhi as a lawyer, and then as an activist, as a great leader, preferred mediation with people in disputes, that they would sit down with him and have a conversation and solve their problem together. This is very different than, having an elder in a village, an elder in a family make a decision for the disputing couple or neighbors. That is, the traditional dispute resolution in India and elsewhere. That's more arbitration. The mediation is facilitating the business owners coming together, the people in the dispute coming together and figuring out how they're going to resolve this conflict without involving the law necessarily, without involving the court system, just doing creative problem solving together. And when I worked with the technical people within this government agency, I saw what I had seen at Hewlett-Packard, that at their worst, and I'm not saying this as a judgment against them, it's just talking about human capacity, ability, the white male American manager of information technology, I can't really say this about business people because that's a very different world. I'll talk about it in a minute, but the technical people, the engineering people, had a hard time in the midst of conflict. And I would even be working because, information technology, it's all about teamwork. You talk about IT, it's never one person, very rarely one person. It's a team of professionals working together for a company. And sometimes the conflict would be within the team. And I would have to be helping that team become more conscious and aware of what was creating conflict and what might help with reconciliation, with problem solving. They struggle with that, and they struggled with supervised conflict, customer conflict. They just didn't feel comfortable and at ease unless they were dealing with their technical expertise and with people who agreed with them and did things exactly the way they did. And that might be fine for doing a high quality job if you're just doing your job, but it is ill-suited for meeting with someone who is concerned with human resources, who is outside of your comfort zone, with whom you have conflict and with whom you need to negotiate and work. So a large part of my work has, and I don't have time today to introduce you to the basics of how I work with people, but that's what I was doing there. Now at the same time, I was asked to start teaching at the University of Denver. And this is where I can start to share in the last part of my remarks with you today, to share the assets that I believe information technology brings to the negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building table. I'm not forgetting business and commerce, though. As I've said before, I think information and technology is driving business and commerce right now. I'm certainly not discussing, the stores and the shops of India at the moment. I'm talking at a bigger level, the bigger corporations, companies, hotels. Um, but at that level, information technology is definitely driving. And once I started teaching, I continued to have the opportunity of students from around the world studying marketing, finance, accounting, name the business commerce function, and information technology coming into my classrooms to study cross-cultural communication, gender communication, the ethics of all of this. And I started to realize what I said to you before. I had a group of students, for example, from Thailand, and they were very much intent on improving the lives of Thai people in Thailand. Studying marketing, definitely excited about becoming part of international business and commerce, but seeing this as a route to much more. And this is where I get excited because you're going to see how these students, and likely many of you, are well suited to not only excel in your paid profession, but to become social entrepreneurs. Silicon Valley has shown us, the very wealthy of Silicon Valley. Bill and Melinda Gates are a good example with public health, have taken their wealth and become social entrepreneurs, creating companies to attack social ills. What is really, climate change, global health, all those issues that desperately need the best of what we can bring to solve them. And after I had been teaching at the University of Denver for a couple of years, the University of California, Berkeley invited me to teach multicultural conflict resolution within international studies. So what I've been describing to you just multiplied dramatically. UC Berkeley, if you've ever been or if you've ever heard, has more international faculty, students, just a very vibrant community. It actually is becoming Little India, in my opinion, last time I visited. So many Indians live there now, have immigrated there. But I also started to have the best and the brightest of the software engineers, the marketing students, the accountants, including students from war-torn countries like Cyprus, violent-ridden communities, desperately searching for answers. Even though they were studying software engineering, they really wanted to tackle much, much greater ills. Poverty was one example. I knew someone, a young Indian American boy, who excelled in computer engineering at Cal and got a plum job in Silicon Valley. But he and his brother were inspired by Gandhi to start a nonprofit to use information technology to help grow the nonprofit social entrepreneur world. So you get an image of this community that I have at Berkeley. Rotary International also approached us while I was at Cal. And Rotary, I imagine some of you will know India's Rotarians. Rotary has in its membership, and this is a social service organization, sort of a fraternity. It's a little bit too male still for me, but there are some women. But very successful business people in commerce around the world. The most successful of many countries are Rotarians, along with doctors and other successful professionals. And they came to Berkeley along with several other universities. In Asia, they started a Center for International Studies in Peace and Conflict Resolution at the International Christian University in Tokyo. And a few years ago, they also started a professional development program in Thailand. So that's their presence there. They have presence here in the United States, in Sweden, the United Kingdom, Australia. They were in Latin America. I don't know if they're still there, but they helped introduce me to the relationship between business, commerce, and my field, peace building, because they were starting these centers. I actually, in my first group of Rotary scholars, I had 2 Indians, a professor of political science from Assam and a lawyer from Delhi. They were starting these centers as part of their social service work. And if you know about their work, doctors will go and help with eye surgeries for free. You know, they'll do many things. They believe in service before self. But as highly successful business people, they also knew that most of the world needs thriving business and commerce in order to build more peace in our world. We cannot, ask our young people to simply, start families without economic opportunities, or at least the education to help them start their own businesses, and I do believe many of these will be virtual, and grow those businesses into success. And Rotarians were very excited about doing this, and part of how they were doing it is by creating these centers. Now, I am very gratified to see more of this happening. And as I've been teaching more software engineers, I am learning that the experimentation, that the field work, the field evaluation that is necessary in my field, there is no way that you sit in a laboratory and you decide how you're going to build peace for other people. You must get out in the field, you must go to the village, you must get to know people, and you must meet with people across conflict, and then with them, test out your ideas to see if they are helpful, if they will work, if they will reduce conflict. Well, software engineers, and I imagine others who play a design role with information technology, tell me that that's exactly how they operate and learn, that they study case studies, they learn information, and then they must apply and experiment and evaluate to see what works. So we actually are operating in very similar ways in these different but overlapping worlds. And if you're familiar with the French, Doctors Without Borders, doctors who travel to the parts of the world like Yemen, Syria, the most troubled parts of the world in need of health care. I hope you will also check out, also started by a Frenchman, a professor of computer engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder, Engineers Without Borders. Because engineers are actually not only retiring to become social entrepreneurs, starting nonprofit organizations, but also while they are in their professions, working in business, working in information technology, finding ways to simultaneously serve those communities. So I currently know a graduate of MIT who is in Tanzania helping with providing clean water access to the poorest of the poor. There are engineers like this all around the world. And one of my colleagues, and even though I say engineers, generally I'm talking about software and computer engineers, those related to information technology. One of my colleagues co-wrote and published with me a few years back, just like your colleague is publishing on cyberbullying. Joe Grimes published on Engineering for Justice. And that is where I want to end today, with my appreciation for how engineers, including the white American males who I felt constrained by when I was a young girl, are becoming more creative themselves and compassionate in responding to real human need outside of their professions, but also within. Joe wrote about providing access to all people, all income levels, all abilities. He wrote about climate change. He wrote many exciting things. If you are interested, I can direct you to that book and that chapter. Well, I was welcomed and invited to speak with you for an hour today. Silicon Valley says 18 minutes is more optimal. I appreciate your generosity. Once again, I hope we have the opportunity in the future to continue this conversation. Have a wonderful conference and take good care.